we are about to start our third panel, which is on the state of energy. But before we start our third panel, in light of the conversation on the last panel about loss of funding, I wanted to let this woman speak to you because she has some opportunities for environmental funding. So, Joanne, thank you.
Hi, I'm Joanne Sowell, and I just wanted to let everybody in the room know about Impact 100 Nashville. It is a women's giving circle, which may not sound that relevant, but we are trying to get the word out that we do have funds for environmental related causes. And so we give out $100,000 grants annually, and we don't get very many environmental applications. So I thought this was a good group to get in front of and let you know about that. Again, it's a women's giving circle. For every 100 members we have, we can give away a $100,000 grant. Last year that was 2. We would like to grow that and have it be more. But if you are interested in speaking with me to find out about the giving circle or the grant application process, I am sitting right over there. So you can come find me later. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So for our third panel today on the state of energy, we're fortunate to have a panel that can offer us diverse perspectives on that, and I look forward to the discussion. Again, bios of these gentlemen are in your pack or available online, so I'm not going to go through them. I am going to say they have a wealth of experience between them. So I look forward to the discussion. Also, the last couple of years, we talked about clean energy and how we source energy, how we create energy. I thought today, I mean, we can certainly discuss that and there can be audience questions, but I thought today it would be interesting for everyone to know what's available out there to help customers. Like what energy efficiency programs are there? What solar programs? What is going on that we can know about or take advantage of? So, first to my left is Ernie Peterson, Tennessee Valley Authority Director of Customer Relations for its northern region. Next to Ernie is Brent Baker, Chief Customer and Innovation Officer for Nashville Electric Service. And finally, next to Brent is Brian Blackmon, former Sustainability Director for the City of Knoxville and now with the Milepost Consulting Group. So they've each got some prepared remarks, and then we'll open it up for question and discussion. So Ernie, I'll turn it over.
All right. Well, good to be here. I've learned a lot sitting through the last few sessions, and I hope this session is interesting for you as well. Ann has asked that we talk a little about the programs that are out there and available. So, Ann has asked that we talk a little about the programs that's out there that's available. And I would just start by saying there's a lot. There's a lot of programs out there, depending on the size and the shape you are as an electricity user. Lots of different programs, many out there. We'll talk about some of those. But before we get into the specifics of the program, I thought it might be good just to do a little bit of groundwork here that leads to the why that we have programs. So I'm with TEA. We do the generation and transmission side of electricity is one of the things we do. So we get it out to the areas and get it to our local power people, like NES. And then they've got the tough work from there to get it from those spots that we drop it off at to get to every house, home, business, industry in their service areas. And they have those connections with all the end users. So we do the generation, the transmission piece, they do the distribution piece. And that's important as we think about the why. But before I go there, let me just go say a few more things about the TVA. As many of you know, the name has come up a few times this morning or this afternoon already, right? So effectively a federally owned utility. We don't get federal money, but it was federal money that was initially used to set this system up. That's all been paid back with interest to the government. So so we are federal, but we don't receive federal funds. And we're nonprofit. The whole reason we exist is to make things, effectively make life better for those that live in our service area. So those two things come into play as we get to the why. There's programs out there to help save on your energy usage and use, save on your energy. So we have the three E's, we call it the energy side of TVA, the economic development side of TVA, and then the environmental side of TVA, which includes running, managing the 7th largest river in the nation, the Tennessee River. So we're balancing those three all the time. I'm going to spend most of my time today on the energy and environmental side of that. But economic development does come into play. We talked about energy burden here a couple of times today, this afternoon. Bringing jobs to the area, that economic development side of things helps with that energy burden in that, you know, how it's calculated, the denominator there, if folks' income is better because of a good job that's in their area, that helps with it as well. So that's a little bit of an overview there, but wanted to get that out there to say not only do we deliver power to our local power companies, we also design and deliver programs. And it makes sense that we, as the generation and transmission, would want programs out there to be sure that energy is being used as efficiently as possible and that we're not wasting the effort that goes into making the electricity. So y'all know this, but of course the least cost, cleanest, and best kilowatt hour of power that can be produced is one that doesn't have to be produced, right? If we can manage the load in such a way to reduce what has to be generated, then that's a win for everybody, right? For all involved. So that's the why behind the programs that we have. So let me take just a couple of minutes and walk through some general categories of programs, and then I'll be glad to take the questions at the end as well. But one category, if you will, of programs is energy efficiency. Of course, energy efficiency programs is designed to do just what it sounds like. The energy that you use at your home or your business, a program that helps you use that better. Use more efficient equipment to get the same amount of work done with less energy. That's the idea with the energy efficiency programs. And Brent will talk maybe more about some of the specifics of these, but that's one category. Another category is demand response programs. Now that's the idea of managing the energy only at the peak times. You have to build this energy system so that it's always ready for all the load that might come on. So if you can manage the load in some way, that manages how much you have to build, that a lot of it's just gonna sit there 95% of the time and not be needed. It will only be needed on those peak times, right? So demand response programs helps manage the load at those peak times. So we've got programs that do that. And then we've got both energy efficiency, demand reduction for both home, business, and industry. We've also got some renewable programs that are out there. These renewable programs allow folks, well, a few things on that. Let me start with TVA's renewables. TVA's got about 7,000 megawatts in renewable power if you include the wind, the solar, and the hydro. We've got about 1,400 megawatts of solar that's actually out there operating. We've got another 2,800 megawatts that we've contracted for. We're waiting for it to get built. It's coming, and that's headed toward a commitment to 10,000 megawatts of power of solar power by 2035. So that's what we're doing on the renewable side, but we've also got programs to help with if you want to do your own generation, right? You can put your own solar in or other types of generation, and 3 different ways you can do that. One, you can put it in and sell everything you generate back to us. Another, you can put it in and just sell us your excess, whatever's left after you use what you need. And then a third would be just put it behind there and use all of it just for yourself. All of that is available out there. That's if you want to put your own generation in. There are other programs where you can actually effectively buy into somebody else's solar generation. So you could buy RECs, or you could buy into a program, community solar program, where you don't have to put your own generation in, but you get the effects of that by going in with some others, doing a group project. All of that's available. And then there's electric vehicles. That's another category of programs that we have. And most of that program is really around getting chargers, fast chargers out there so folks can use them. Right now we've got about 60 of our local power companies that have put these fast chargers all over our service area. There was, if you look at my notes here, 16,000 charges on these units just in the last year. So they're out there and they're being used. So that's I think that's good for all involved as well. We've also got some resources about EVs. We've got comparison calculators and things out there to help folks as they're thinking that. And then finally, and I'm going to stop, is what we're doing in regards to low carbon emissions in general. I think it's already been said, first thing in this conference was around right at 60% of every kilowatt hour that we generate comes from a generation source that doesn't have a smokestack, that there's no air emissions. So no carbon, no SOx, no NOx, all of those things. Now there's other things we have to deal with for sure, right? But 60%, over half of all the energy that's produced out there comes from the nuclear, the hydro, the solar, and the wind. So low carbon delivery. And then I'm going to kick it over to Brent here, but Brent with NES, I get to work with a lot of local power companies. NES is on top of their game when it comes to delivering programs or finding ways to squeeze out every benefit they possibly can for their customers. We've got programs, some of these programs I'm thinking about right now are only because NES came to us and said, hey, we need to do this for our customers. So I'm gonna turn it over to Brent Baker, and he's gonna get into a few more details.
Very good, thank you. And we're gonna click forward and get to my slides, that'll work?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, see if that'll work. We've got to get, I was trying to do it up here without.
Visit on the slide. Here we go. Okay, so real quick, I'm gonna go over just a little bit about me, even though we didn't do bios. I've been here for about 2 years in Nashville, but about 23 to 24 years in the utility industry. Started my career in a company that was investor owned and operated out of the four-state area of Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, which the really cool thing about that is all the wind that blew in Kansas at some point. I don't know if you all call it that, we call it the Saudi Arabia of wind. Okay, it's not, so that's what we said, I'm glad you all laughed, because it is actually a thing that, it's so much wind in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, that it was really easy for us to consider that. So within a few years of my career, we started pursuing as a company wind energy. Our CEO at the time really thought that was an opportunity for us to get ahead of, we were a smaller investor-owned utility compared to the really big ones around the country. And if we could get ahead of it, we thought we could buy materials and get labor at a more affordable rate than if all the other big companies started joining that idea. So by 2008, we had 18% of our generation, or 80% of our load from wind, which at that time we also said we were fighting the wind. As I'm an engineer by trade, and so a lot of us would talk about how hard it was to incorporate the wind, because back when you had other assets like coal and natural gas, you kind of knew what the button push would be. And so we were then learning how the market actually worked and how the wind patterns would work. And over a few years, we became really pretty good at predicting what the next day's wind output would be. But one thing that started to really also happen over time was, gosh, it would be really nice if you could get some load that was dispatchable instead of everybody just using load when they want to as a utility customer. And so we started, and it wasn't only us, but the electric industry started really thinking about how could we get dispatchable load? And that was long before batteries and really maybe electric vehicles that, well, there were electric vehicles that were tried in the 70s and 80s, and horror stories at our company. We bought a truck one in the 70s that made it an hour down the road to one of our service centers and didn't make it back. And so things were evolving. We really started looking at how could we get dispatchable load, and we had no clue what that really meant. But then, not long after that, electric vehicles started to really possibly be a thing. And two things for us, we had flat to declining load growth from 2008 to 2011. After the recession, nothing came back the same way it was before. So one, we were looking at, here's some load growth, like I was not there at the time, but in the 80s and 90s, there was a 3 to 5% load growth, which was really nice because your revenue would grow. You could invest in capital and not do rate increases. So could electric vehicles be a nice little mode for an electric company to not have to go back for when you're flat to declining, you have to fix a lot of stuff, but you have to ask customers to pay more for the same thing. So maybe electric vehicles could be that. So, sorry, Ann, I'm going down my bio, I'm going to get to these things. But in 2014 and 15, our CEO said, all right, we need a team to do electric vehicles and a team to do rooftop solar and figure out as a company how we're going to survive all the changes going on. And it really was a scary time with flat to declining load growth and what was going to happen with solar. We were giving away rebates to rooftop solar. So we were figuring that out, did our first EV program in 2015 and 16 and learned a ton. And I'm almost done. We got bought by a Canadian company in 2017. So it started in 15, went through the due process in 16. 2017 became a part of a Canadian company that was really a renewable energy developer that was buying utilities. And so got to see a lot of renewable development. We had a separate group, but we were a small enough company. I got to be a part of some of those. And we built an 800 megawatt wind farm out in Kansas for that same company I grew up in. $1.5 billion project, tax equity partnership, and got that online. And was really an interesting project because we actually built wind in Missouri, which normally had not been possible, but hub heights had got high enough, we were able to do that. So also got to do a lot of innovation there, and now I'm going to get into what I'm going to talk about today. We were doing a lot of things with energy efficiency, demand response, and pushing the envelope, because for us, if we could move the levers, all of them, like Ernie said, if we could get energy to not be used at those right times and not set new peaks, we could predict that right level of generation resource and possibly be cleaner and be more to that future look. And so, fast forward, I worked at another municipal for 3 years and then got this opportunity about 2 years ago to move to Nashville. And I'm excited about some of the opportunities, and I'm going to talk about kind of what has been going on in Nashville and some of the future ideas. But First off, I'll go through some of the existing programs and what might be future, go into demand response, and then finish with some of the energy management. Hopefully I'll tell you something new today that you didn't realize we were doing, and also some good discussion we might get to have also. I know this is a small chart, but it's mainly to tell you there's a ton of residential programs that sometimes I find out a lot of people aren't familiar with. And a little bit of a critique of me and my team is we need to do a better job from NES's perspective of promoting and marketing those. When you're a vertically integrated utility and it's your power plants and your customers, you do sometimes a little bit more to make sure people are adopting those programs quickly because it has that direct impact. And what we're working on now is making sure our customers know exactly what they can get out of residential programs. And there's a lot of, if you don't know this, you can have a home energy audit done. You can have somebody come, you can do it yourself if you're a DIY type person. There's a DIY option on there. TVA also has a contract program where a contractor will come to your house and look it over and tell you what improvements you can make. There's also several rebate programs within there, so those are really nice programs for our customers, not that we can't do more, challenge the status quo and buy more, but I want to make sure while we're here today that you all are at least familiar with that. Also, on business and industry, we have a lot of partnerships with our schools and our commercial and industrial groups to make sure they have options for improving their lighting, which is huge. If you're a commercial facility, you can really reduce your load need by replacing those lights. There's also several different partnerships to get our commercial and industrial customers to do load control of their own. So you can see those, some of the cool projects in the metro area, Metro Nashville, have been some of the school uplift programs. Some of the students have been able to see the uplift, so we're getting kind of next level STEM awareness, and students who may have seen a project at their school, that in their future we hope to become accountants, engineers, and professionals that care about the energy future. So some things that we're considering that in addition to those that are on the already being done is a low income elderly home insulation program. And this is something that actually, I know we'll talk about some, but when the federal funds started to go away, here came some people with some private dollars that came to Metro who came to us and said, hey, we have some people who are willing to fund something that is out. We know the dollars may be a little bit difficult right now on the grant side. Is there anything we could do that would be philanthropic, be environmentally friendly, and help a constituency that maybe really benefit from this? And we went down a path of low income installation. And the really nice thing is I was able to call Ernie and TVA and say, hey, what if we put an idea like this together? What product do you already have that we don't have to spend a year developing? And we already had a solution for other programs that fit right in. So we're partnering with the funds we got. TVA is kicking in some dollars. We're kicking in some dollars. We're going to start with 100 homes and do 100 home low income installation. And the nice thing about installation, separate from our big home uplift that we sometimes advertise a lot, is you can really make quick movement in that installation. Does reduce carbon and energy pretty quickly. And that's a really nice project for a lot of those customers that will receive it. It's also a good opportunity when we have some of those smaller dollars to kind of go through and see at a higher level, is this something we would ever want to do on a bigger scale? So really, that one's really in the works right now. Rebates for renters. People who rent homes oftentimes struggle to get a landlord to do some of the programs that they could. They may be able to do home uplift, but as a renter to get your landlord to be interested in that, depending on what effort, it may not even be investment, that effort itself is really tough to get a landlord to buy in sometimes. And so we're looking at programs that others in the country have done a good job of. It's really kind of, not to make excuses, it's kind of hard to break through that space, but we want to figure that out. And then an energy savings market space. Marketplace. How could we get customers to know what is the next best action? And we know a lot through the data we have. We're looking at ways to use AI and technology we have within our customer information systems to then start to give people targeted messages about, we see certain things that you have done before with us. There's something that might be a good next step. And if you can get people in that kind of space of growing their awareness of their energy burden and what control they might have, we hope we can bring people along into being really energy aware as customers. And as a utility industry, it's kind of been the dream, at least as long as I've been in it, that we could someday communicate and not just be the building that people know the logo of, but that we actually are somebody that can help you be more energy aware. It's also small, but wanting to just show you that the demand response programs we have are there to help our customers and really our commercial customers reduce that usage at those peak times and help them be able to create better energy bills of their own. Demand is a high cost on purpose for our industrial customers and help them be able to manage as well. And then dynamic voltage regulation, we as a utility, and actually all of the local utilities around Tennessee Valley Authority do this quite well. I don't know if all of them do, but a lot of us do. Or we will reduce our demand by, within the transformers, we can move tap changers and kind of change our electrical needs so that we can have a lower demand on the system. The good thing for us is we have a lower bill that month also, so our customers will have less cost at the end of the month for what that might be like to do stuff.
Can you just say what demand response is?
Yeah, demand response, good. So this is our, so I'll say it this way, back when in the other states, I worked in the state, before we called it demand response, the states were saying, you all as utilities can't set any more new peak. So if your peak is 1,000 megawatts, 2,000 megawatts, whatever, you need to not set a new peak. So demand response is that attempt to give customers a tool or the utility to give a motivation to get people to not set a new peak, to get us as a utility to not set a new peak. Is that a good way to summarize it? Yeah. And so what levers can we pull and how can we motivate people? There's things like time of meetings, I'll get into a little bit more. But this dynamic voltage regulation, when we see peaks coming, every Monday we meet at National Electric Service to look at the week ahead and the temperatures. We think, okay, Wednesday is going to be the day that the peak is going to be set. And if that's going to set a new peak for the month, we don't want to do that. One, financially, we want to save our customers money, but two, we want to also help TVA not set new peaks. Those are usually times where energy requests might be going out to the community as well. So if we can avoid that, we want to avoid that. So I'll get into a future here. So future things to consider. Connected thermostats. We're working on that right now with TVA. Actually, TVA is going to drive that one forward. As local power companies doing distribution only, it's harder to make a thermostat program really pin financially for our customers' benefit. But if we all partner together with TVA, that does make more sense. And so, as a local provider, I kind of want the idea of us to do as many of those things for the customers so they know that the local utility is doing it. In this situation, TVA coming up with bigger program helps us get economies of scale. A lot of customers that have moved to Nashville have lived other places and have had thermostat programs and have worked at a peak power pricing with their utility. Oftentimes, you can get a higher satisfied customer with a lower 12-month bill at the end of a 12-month period with thermostat programs, and the utility itself can have also a positive impact as well. So this actually can be done right, and we end up with a really good thing. So kudos to TVA giving us that opportunity. We were looking at Nashville, and we really struggling to make it make sense for our customers alone. DVR 2.0, that's that dynamic voltage reduction regulation. We're looking at a new way to do it. We're doing it a certain way right now as utilities. We were working with TVA to come up with a new way so that all of us work to reduce that TVA peak and make sure they're not setting new peaks. Right now, we're doing it for our advantage as a local utility, which does help TVA, but not always. We may pick a time that's our peak time, but isn't coincident with TVA's. So it'll be good for us if we all work together and reduce that, so they're not having to build a power plant to meet what the region has set as a peak. Time of use rates. That similarly with thermostats, you can do some peak pricing. You can help people know price signal and encourage behavior. As a utility, we are also customer service entities, so we can't do things with too much. We have to do a carrot, not a stick oftentimes, and we want to make sure our customers see it as a value. So that will be an important thing that we develop in a way that brings people along to understand the value of being in a time of use program. We have a new customer information system that we will go live with in 2 weeks. The reason I just showed up before this was because I was doing some things on that project to get it ready, but that's a huge lift for a utility. The new technology we've got the old technology was 40 years old on a COBOL system, which doesn't give us a lot of flexibility to do new things. The new system is an Oracle-based system we've been building for several years. Will give us the modern tools we need, and many other utilities across the country are using the same product, so we can go to national meetings and work together with what have they already done, develop programs kind of in parallel and not have to reinvent the wheel as much. EV managed charging, one of the demand controls we will have to do, and we can't wait till it is a problem, so we're doing it now, is to help people manage their EV charging and have an EV charging network that is managed. So we're working on what that will look like. It likely will have a time of use component, or it may have another kind of category of rate tier up or rate class that makes that happen. And the last thing behind the meter options, I've worked up in the Canadian company. We had 13 states, Bermuda and Canada. And one of the places we had a behind the meter battery program where in the home people could sign up for a behind the meter battery. And if you've heard Green Mountain Power up in Vermont, we're all friends in the utility industry, so I'll say this, but we stole their idea, went and met with them, didn't change much, and rolled it out for us. So things like that are things that we are wanting to see what works in Nashville, what would customers want, and that's another one that you do as a curator, and you help people find a way to find value in that. We pair that up with some other rate options we have, and help people, one, see the utility as a trusted advisor, and they want some really good testimonials, people who signed up for those. But other behind the meter options for resiliency, for renewable options, this last year, we just went live with our natural electric service offerings of NES Solar Savings and Solar Connect, so rooftop solar and grid connected solar. So those options came out this last year. They're on our website, and we are really, this new CIS will help us make it easier for us to incorporate those, but they're available, and we're manually doing a lot of work when applications come in. Energy management, I think I'm about to my last slide here, but some of the things I mentioned, managed charging, we also had a study, we hired an engineering firm to look around our whole territory and say, where are we going to see the biggest impact? Based on several studies of human behavior, plus what our system limits are right now. So we now know where we should be investing in our infrastructure upgrades. That helps us really plan a lot of our normal reliability upgrades to make sure it also could coincide with some of the system needs. Clean energy to energy to communities, which was just clean energy to communities. I think a couple weeks ago it became energy to communities, and so you all know why. So that is a really neat opportunity we have with the national labs that we're working on. We're building a digital twin of our system, and it's really just a full-time, real-time model of our system that we can look at our territory and say, let's imagine that it would be really good for our system to put rooftop solar and EV charging, but in a different way than the customers might normally do it. So what if we put solar on rooftops facing east instead of south and west for the purpose of our grid needs? What if we had EV charging that had a time of use rate different than the whole system? This is pie in the sky stuff, so we're not doing it next year. Just let me brainstorm for a minute. But what if we did that EV charging in a way that also helped the system load be able to be managed well? And someday, as a utility industry, more like that. Australia's already kind of close to that in a lot of ways. And so that's what that study will help us in. Having a real-time model will help us look at our distribution system as a whole and model some ideas that come up from time to time. And then lastly, one that's actually in progress is our LED streetlight project, which is a partnership with NDOT and Metro. 55,000 streetlights are going to be replaced. We're more than halfway through that. 23 million kilowatt hours per year will be reduced, 3,600 pounds of carbon reduced every year. And for us as a utility, smart street lighting controls will know when lights go out. We'll be able to monitor, control, and do some other things on those that right now it requires a manual intervention on a truck to roll. So really nice there for customers who have to call in now, or maybe have noticed a street light out and didn't call, until we get a phone call or have the night trucks and notice it. We don't do things as quickly as we'd like to. So, I hope that covers enough of a base. And I know you said she told us 8 minutes. Sorry.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start at a little bit higher level and then we'll bring it back down. So I'm Blackmon, I do consulting work. A number of people here know me. I was a government sustainability professional for a decade, worked in environmental nonprofits before then. I am lucky that folks like TVA and NES pay me to basically come in and help them think through what aspirational sort of entity that they can be. You know, what exists out there, what are the possibilities, and what are steps that they can make, whether that's a year, 2 years, 10 years, or more, to get to that state. So let's go back to baby Brian, and a lot less gray hair, but when I was coming into the field, it was during the time of the Great Recession. And so one of the factoids that I picked up coming into the field is start learning about energy, and the Great Recession had this massive impact on energy efficiency programming. Industry demanded it, or we were gonna lose jobs. They couldn't afford the bills, they wanted to get the manufacturing. So everyone invested, the federal government dumped tons of money into research, into efficient appliances, efficient strategies. Companies invested in energy managers, and we saw this massive swing in basically energy efficiency programs. And the interesting nugget out of that is that probably 3 years after that shift happened, I remember folks at the National Lab talking about, for the first time in their observations since the Industrial Revolution, essentially, that energy use, demand growth year over year, decoupled from GDP. It was no longer that, like, if you were expected a higher GDP, that you would need to increase load because of efficiency. Efficiency had an inflection point where those two things decoupled. And I got a lot of mileage out of that factoid for probably most of my government career. And it was a fantastic disruptor that really showed the power of what a program can do to the energy system, but it's starting to become no longer true. So a decade removed, we have a new disruptor that's kind of bringing the GDP and energy load growth into a little bit more predictable trajectory. No surprise, we were already talking about it in the first panel, AI, data centers, hyperscalers. If you have software in it as a cloud-based platform, which probably most of your Microsoft Office, Adobe Creative Suite, whatever you use, that is now managed at a data center level. So those are not things, whenever we think about typical data centers, that can be scaled down. They have to be available on demand, and they essentially raise the new base for how much energy you're going to need to provide within a territory. So this is a big disruptor. We're not necessarily feeling the pinch of it now, but whenever we talk to peer utilities, when we attend conferences with joint action agencies, they are all strategizing about how they're going to respond. Because they've essentially had a decade of not having to think about building massive new generation facilities. They've just had to worry about, retirements and what they're going to do when someone hits end of life, and or how they're going to meet carbon reduction scenarios that are required from international commitments, private industry. And while data centers make up like 1 to 2% of our US total demand, there are studies published by MIT, other entities that are projecting by 2030 that's going to be somewhere around 20 to 21% global energy use. So we're going from a relatively small percentage to scaling really quickly. And unfortunately, in my dialogue, I'm so used to 2030 commitments from Paris Climate Agreement, and you start thinking 2030 seems really long time away. It's really not anymore. You're talking in 5 years going from 1 to 2% to 21% of global energy demand as an industry, and essentially all other things hold constant. That's a massive amount of energy to think about as the globe perspective. And the impacts of that at a macro level energy system, not just TVA, but across the nation, across the world, delayed retirement in fossil facilities. You need those to be able to meet the needs of your customers, especially new ones that are coming online. And they're also trying to think through how they're going to meet the short-term capacity for these build-outs. So that 5-year window of getting into 2030, that's probably a best case scenario of what you could do with a gas plant. I'm not advocating for gas here before Ken gets riled up, but whenever you're thinking about that, that's the most ideal scenario, that you could build a large scale generation facility, and that's ideal scenario. So there's a real and urgent disruptor in the midst. And the short-term solution is going to be innovation and programs. It's going to be pricing the marketplace appropriately to squeeze in every last drop that you can get out of the efficient delivery of electricity from generation facility to customer. So what's great about the Tennessee Valley and the multi-state TVA area is TVA provides a really good foundation to a lot of LBCs that are rural communities that otherwise would not have the financial means to be able to offer programs. So TVA's based programs for business and industry as well as residential programs really sets a solid foundation to help businesses and residents in the area safe. We can argue a little bit on price points of what that looks like, and that's a criticism that I've heard for years. From what we've seen in comparing TVA's cost of utilities based off like what we expect to save and the dollar per kilowatt hour sort of factor, TVA typically skews somewhere in the average range. Maybe a little bit below average here or there, but to their credit, they look at that consistently, and then the beginning of March actually updated some of those prices that should be more in line with what they would expect. They want people to take advantage of those because that defers the need to invest in new generation facilities. Gives them a little bit more time, as well as helps the customer. That's a win-win for both entities in that scenario. Where we see the most innovation, particularly in the valley, are the LPCs like EPB, NES, KP, W, Huntsville. I'm leaving a few out, but generally large urban areas with very sophisticated public power entities there that have an innovation department. That's a very rare thing, but like having an innovation department is where you start to see the burgeoning new programs. Like we don't have net metering in Tennessee. Controversial, I think most of probably environmental advocates in here, but while NES would never say it's net metering, their Solar Connect programs and their new solar programs operate very much to the letter, kind of how you would expect a net metering solar program to work. They're buying excess energy, they're buying overproduction. So that is not across the entire valley though. So there are opportunities for us to grow. What it really needs long-term is for TVA to start adopting some of those. TVA's willing partners, Brent's kind of indicated on the demand response thermostat program. So if we're thinking about a marketplace here and really where you're going to see that innovation, obviously it's going to happen at the LPC level, and that's where you're going to see the majority of what I think everyone's wish list is for grid modernization. As you start thinking about microgrids, as you start thinking about distributed energy resources, small scale solar, pocket solar, community solar, those things happen on an LPC level because that's where the customer base needs it, and that's also kind of where the energy to innovate is. They're the front line for the customer, so they're having to deal with a lot of pressures of what the customer expects from other territories, other nations, that also align with what their corporate outcomes would be, what's good for their bottom line. There were a couple of things that I heard earlier in the panels that I would love to bring up. But thinking about having invested in energy efficiency as something that I heard in the initial panel on kind of state of the system. There's a pretty decent investment in energy efficiency programming within the valley. Again, look to TVA for kind of the baseline, definitely check with the local utility on maybe what's different or what's unique about what they offer. But whenever we compare kind of the extremes of what is cited as examples, there's usually some sort of external force driving that. If I go look at Arizona and I think about Arizona's sort of rate structure, I've got a colleague out there that has like Russell would triple on-peak pricing in their condo. So imagine your electricity could be like 46 kilowatt hour if you're completely off-peak. And then you have 3 different scales of on-peak and you could be paying up to 30 cents a kilowatt hour for that. That is a nightmare for kind of energy affordability in the valley when things are so cheap. But there are market constraints about what it would cost for them to be able to manage that demand or that imposition on the grid is effectively priced, right? So they've developed a market there that works for them. I don't necessarily know that whenever we cite those sorts of examples that we want to always translate them one-to-one in this amount of energy burden. There's a lot of groundwork that we have to do about raising the bar for retrofits, housing improvements that don't just affect low income. The reality is our region has substandard housing for a lot of pay ranges, and moderate income individuals are usually the ones that don't have the financial means to actually replace their HVAC, but also don't qualify for programs to be able to replace it. And so you're one layoff, one small life block from essentially being poor, homeless, or having other sorts of impositions. We don't really design programs for this. We do need a middle ground to think about that here in the valley and not just turning a blind eye to it because they fall within a certain tax bracket. If we really want to get wise with investments, that's kind of the missing piece there is a moderate program. I would love to hear from the crowd.
Great, do we have any questions?
Hi, I'm an NES customer, and also I live in Cheatham County where a proposed methane plant is going in with TVA. Also, in 2010, I was a generation partner, and it helped at that time repay the energy efficiencies that I put into my house in 6 years. 3 or 4 years later, it seemed like those energy efficiencies went away from TVA, went away from NES. And I see lately that Duke Energy, our neighbor in North Carolina, is outspending TVA 40 to 50 times, not 40 or 50%, 40 to 50 times more on energy efficiency. And so I'm just wondering if, did TVA, NES go sleep at the switch during those 10 years? But it seems like we may be paying for it now with these methane plants instead of maybe if we had done this 10 years ago. So it seemed like we need to be a little bit more aggressive on energy efficiency and renewable energy, and I'll just listen to your comments.
Yeah, so I know you guys made so, but customers certainly, need us as utilities to push the envelope on that, and I think, I don't know, a year or 2 years so easy for me to say, I don't know what happened, I don't want to take that totally easy road. But we are driving forward, and so our new CEO that's now almost 3 years in that job created the position I'm in and recruited me, and my task is to find the programs that will matter to our customers in that same vein. We just reorged another group within the organization. I now have a group that is customer insights and programs, and we're intentionally looking at all the data that we know about our customers, but also what's going on in the industry and creating the programs that matter. So exactly what that will mean and what will come from that, I'm not certain, but I don't know historically why things have happened. I know where I was, there were times that energy efficiency really made sense, and there were times that it fell off of, in the state regulator world, of the radar of what was the most beneficial. Usually the state regulators made you do the thing that was least cost most beneficial, but I don't know what we did here, so maybe Ernie.
Yeah, all that absolutely correct. I would also add that energy efficiency is always the right thing to do. But sometimes it has more financial value than it would other times. In a period of low or no growth, the financial calculation for energy efficiency just isn't there. So if you're trying to keep rates as low as possible, then you're careful about how much you pay for energy efficiency. When things start getting tight as far as generation versus load, now that energy efficiency has real value because you're offsetting building that next unit, whatever that is. And that's where we find ourselves today, is in this low growth situation, and we are racking things back up. But they were leveled off there for a while. You read it.
As a member of the public and as someone with a corporate finance background, I'm confused about TVA's fiduciary duty. So what is the bottom line? What is the metric that you're going for to make decisions like to build another gas plant?
Sure, great question. And I could spend an hour talking about this, and we can catch up later if you'd like. But short answer is we are here. We're not making a profit. We're not trying to pay investors. We're here strictly to serve the area. So every decision that we make has two things in the middle of it. One is the resiliency of the power, the reliability, knowing that it's going to be there. and then the other is the cost. And sometimes there's a balance there that you have to do, right? But it's those two things that, bottom line, make the decision.
Sorry, we'll take this question and two more, and I know that the Ernies will be here after, and for the cocktail hour. And you'll be here, so maybe there'll be a chance for the questions that aren't asked, to talk with them. But anyway, go ahead.
This question is for Brent, is on. You can probably hear me. You're limited in the buyback solar programs by 5% maximum TVA has for solar generation of any sort in the LDCs. You're limited to a 5% cap. I know that you have done the great thing of a big contract with the Magnolia plant. For a large part of that 5% ES generation from solar. And you left a little bit of leftover to do, I guess, the solar savings and the solar connect.
Correct.
And my question is it correct then that those two programs, rooftop solar, people will sell back to you their excess, commercial selling back excess, those count towards your 5%? And also, what about big projects like the city's projects on the water plant, those big solar, does that count towards your 5% that you're limited to? And how much room is there left for more rooftop solar and warehouse solar and all that
Right.
under that 5%?
Yeah, so the answer is yes, most of that counts towards the 5%, so we have the 160 megawatt Magnolia project, plus the rooftops. Some of the metro projects do count toward it, but there are a few that are in their own side of the meter, kind of non-counting, not counting toward the 5%, so not to get into all the details, some of those are megawatt at a time, so there's a little bit of room there. One thing we're doing as a company is working with TVA to see what that next 5% looks like, how do we get the next 5% and the next 5%, what can that look like? We don't have we'll continue to look at what the right thing to do for all of us will be, and so that's something there. So as we look, we still have plenty of room to fill out these programs and to make sure we get full adoption inside the walls of National Electric Service. And I will point to Chairman Vanderbilt, or chairman of our board. We worked together one time recently and came up with a group that's a cross-functional team within NES and has developed a rooftop program, not that we can deploy immediately, but to evaluate how could we possibly use our roofs, metro roofs, warehouse roofs, just as you kind of alluded to figure what that could look like. So we done that as a case study. We have a bit of a on the shelf. We know what it was, and we know what the price of solar would have to be to make that make sense. Some of those things. So we're not done. So I would say we're going to continue to push the envelope to figure out what might matter and make sense. And the good thing about this, technology changes all the time. Something's going to evolve, and what we know today isn't what it will be in 5 years. So that's what we're working on.
Okay, one last question, thank you.
There's a big pool of money for energy efficiency that was supposed to be coming down from the Inflation Reduction Act. And my understanding is that we don't really know where that stands. I don't know if that was $1 billion or hundreds of millions, or I know it was a lot of money. And I know that a big part of it would be able to help low-income households to basically pay nothing to get those upgrades. So it's an environmental justice issue. And I know that you all don't make the decision. But I guess what I'm wondering is how hard are you lobbying to get that money?
Yeah. So
I mean, are you putting pressure on the Department of Energy, saying we want that money, we need that money?
yes, we work with all of our municipal utilities across the country as well. So we're in a group called the American Public Power Association that also works together. So everything from direct pay, I'm not sure how much we've talked about that, but investor-owned utilities get tax credits for building renewable projects. As a municipal, we wouldn't normally, we're lobbying to continue the direct pay effort as well, so that we could possibly in the future build more projects. Same way with money for energy efficiency. We're definitely leading in and making sure our voices are doing the best we can.
Do more.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.